Donald Trump truly enjoys the attention he receives whenever people talk about another presidential term for him in 2028, and he often fans that flame. But is he serious about overturning the Constitution to make that happen? In today's breaking story, he just tipped his hand, and I have all the details for you next. Trump's clearest communication for a third term came to light in this just-released interview he had with The Atlantic, which also happens to be his biggest media adversary these days. Please check out some of the highlights in this CNN report, and then I'll have his latest words about 2028.
President Trump says during his second term, he runs the country and the world. That is from his latest interview out just minutes ago, marking his 100 days in office. He sat down with a team from The Atlantic in the Oval Office for their cover story. Part of that team was editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg. You might remember him as the guy mistakenly added to a group chat about military plans in Yemen. He was invited on purpose for this interview. Joining me now to talk about this is Michael Scherer, staff writer at The Atlantic, one of the journalists behind this latest interview. Michael, thanks for being here with us.
We interviewed him in March by phone after he publicly denounced me and my reporting colleague Ashley Parker as being lunatic leftists and liars. But then when we called him, he took our call. We had a perfectly fine, gracious interview. Obviously, after that, the Signalgate thing happened. He attacked The Atlantic ruthlessly, attacked my boss, Jeffrey Goldberg, ruthlessly. By the end, though, and this is just last week, he was in a far more conciliatory mood. You know, the tone of that exchange was very respectful. He was, acknowledged the success of the Signalgate story, wasn't doing what he did in the days afterwards, which was to deny anything improper had happened. He mentioned to us, for instance, that Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, was getting his act together, and he'd had a talk with him. He admitted that the national security advisor had gone through a difficult time as well. If you remember back during the campaign, Democrats would argue that there would be no boundaries on a second Trump term. It would be very different than the first. And it turns out they may have even been understating it. Trump overcame something that really no president, no leader has overcome before. If you go back to the days after January 6th, where you have multiple Republicans voting to convict him in the Senate, you have, most of the party, corporate America cutting him off, social networks cutting him off. He was able to come back to power. And I think that experience, which is really what we tried to explore in this story, informs the boldness with which he is governing now. He really doesn't see many boundaries to going after people he perceived to be his enemies, even if he's doing things to them that he objected when government did to his allies before. Yeah. He feels fine doing it now. I mean, his economic policies obviously are very disruptive and of questionable effectiveness. And that comment about running the world, I mean, he truly does believe that he has enormous leverage at this point.
With context established, let's now have a listen to the audio that was just published by The Atlantic with their version of the Trump encounter, and I specifically curated his mentions of a 2028 run.
Was there anything that he said that will keep you vigilant, where you left thinking, oh, we have to keep our eye on this one?
Yeah, when Ashley asked him about the 2028 hats and what they might mean, he mostly made a joke of it and said it wasn't very likely and, acknowledged that he's a shatterer of norms, but kind of indicated that that's not that might be a norm too far. But he didn't just say, no, of course I'm not trying to run in 2028. The Constitution doesn't. A normal politician in his second term as president would say, why are you asking me whether I would run for a third term? I can't. But this is Donald Trump, so everything's open. And why would it be surprising if he somehow tries to hold on to power?
That's the crisis.
Right, and we haven't done that. Ashley, you asked Trump about the 2028 hats that his organization is selling. Yes, you rolled your eyes when I asked you that. What was your takeaway about what he's saying about running for a third term?
Well, this is always the question. Michael and I separately had been chasing a tip we had heard that he had asked his attorney general and his Department of Justice to look into whether or not he could seek a third term. And he said, no, I haven't. So that was something we wanted to know. Is this true? But what's interesting is in reporting out that story, you sort of hear both sides from his advisors, which is that he says this as a troll. He says this as a, provocation. But, there's people on the outside, Steve Bannon and others, who really are looking at ways to do this. And by the way, also, if Trump ever thought it was actually feasible, yeah, he'd seriously consider it. And that was sort of the answer he then gave us. So he said, no, I haven't, asked for a legal opinion on this. And I kind of pressed him and said, well, you've shattered so many norms. This isn't another norm you'd like to shatter. And he sort of goes, well, that'd be a really big shatter, wouldn't it? Maybe I just really want to shatter. But then he pauses and says, but look, it's not something I'm talking about. It's not something I've looked into. And frankly, I think it would be quite hard to do. So it's kind of a no until and unless it becomes a yes.
My takeaway is this. Donald Trump is not serious about 2028, and I don't think we should take him seriously. He'll be 82 years old, he'll be showing more signs of decline and making more gaffes, and when he crosses a certain line, he'll face the same resistance that Joe Biden did. But I think he's very serious about milking the 2028 chatter for the attention and as a rallying point for the gullible base, and I think that's the real story here. Many love their king unconditionally and would vote for him again no matter what his mental and physical condition is, but I don't think the moderate supporters and independents would continue to back him, so I'm not worried about a Trump 3.0. My best thinking is, even in light of his unusually honest admission today, I think we can expect him to never fully commit to ruling it out, and he'll continue to let the base, the commentators, and even his own staff fuel the rumors just to keep his name trending each day and to feed his bottomless ego. I'm actually okay with this scenario, and I hope you are too, because it will keep the Republican Party, including the 2028 hopefuls, in disarray. Everything Donald Trump is doing now supports the party of Trump and damages the Republican Party. And at this rate, the mess he's going to leave in 2028 will set the Democrats up to be the logical, less extreme, and less chaotic choice.